So welcome back. Today I'm going to be showing you how to upgrade the SSD in the SteamDeck. Now I went from a 64 gig model because it's the price point, and then upgraded to a 1TB 2230. Now the 2230 NVMEs unfortunately generally are a lot dearer than the 228 counterparts or 2280 counterparts, mainly because of the fact that they're limited use. They tend to be used in elements such as the Microsoft Surface and other kind of laptops, tablet hybrid devices, which does make them a little bit rarer, scarcer. Manufacturers probably don't push them out too much. I imagine now that this is out, there's going to be a bigger market, so in years to come, if you're watching this video, I'm sure you'll probably get a better price point. But I think I paid an equivalent of about £134 for my 1TB one. But then when you kind of weigh up the cost of the 349 plus that, I got a 1TB SteamDeck rather than a 512. The screens, obviously there is an anti-glare one with a 512 model. However, you know, companies such as iFixit basically have released so you can buy all the parts. So at some point I may well go and get the anti-glare screen and be brave and do that as well. So other elements you'll need: really good screwdriver set. Make sure the bits actually fit the screwdrivers. I would suggest testing that first. Make sure you apply some pressure but not too much. Something to put your SteamDeck in while you're doing this, because you're obviously going to be working upside down. I went and downloaded a 3D printed repair jig. I'll stick the link in the description. That was really useful. Others have suggested using the actual SteamDeck case, which I can see that working because it's kind of sat in there, or think of some kind of soft cushion that's going to be on there, but it still allows a bit of, you know, rigidity to it, so that when you're applying pressure you can get them out. Again, something like a guitar plectrum or you know, credit card, or one of those kind of mobile phone device bits to actually remove the, you know, the seals around the SteamDeck. Don't use anything metal because you will ruin it. There aren't any RMA challenges, although you'll hear a lot of scaremongering from people on SteamDeck communities. Steam did clear this up recently, where it did go viral for a while, that Steam were basically, or a Steam employee kind of said that no, we won't accept it. I will say, if you do get problems afterwards, just swap the original one back out. You shouldn't break anything doing this process. The hardest part of doing this is actually removing the battery, because that cable is quite fragile and very fiddly. Just take your time over that in particular, and also with the screws, take your time, don't rush. I went like you know, bat out of hell and lost one of the screws, and you know, I'll have to replace it, you know, after making this video. So yeah. And again, the final thing is just, you know, make sure you download the elements needed from the links. Get yourself a good USB-C or, you know, and a USB-A device just to write on. It doesn't need to be massive. I used a 128, I believe, but you can pick them up reasonably cheap now. They're not particularly dear, and I'll probably stick a link again for one of them in the description. But yeah, just follow the guide, and all the best. Now I'm using a repair jig which I 3D printed. I found the design on Thingiverse. I will credit the designer, but it basically snaps in two, so you've got the ability to store it. And obviously if you've only got a small bed like mine, I think mine's a 300 by 300, it gives you the ability to print in two sections, and then it's easier to store as well. The key thing when replacing the SSD in the SteamDeck is, one, if you bought the 64 gig model like I did, I would suggest running it for a few days first, just to make sure that there's no challenges around the SteamDeck before you go replacing anything. The other one is to always remove any micro SD cards. The amount of people that I've seen that have reported breakages while doing this because they haven't removed the SD cards. So if you understand, the lips kind of cross over and it will snap off the top end. So I'm quite happy that that's now turned off. Now I will not physically replace the hard drive myself on this occasion, because I'd already done it previously, but I'm kind of just going to show you the tear down of how it goes. Now there are 8 screws in total, all dotted around the edges, apart from those 2. The ones on the far corners, those 4, are slightly longer, so when you're putting them back it's a lot easier to find. Now I use one of these magnetic maps so I can pretty much put them in the positions that they should be. I will say, however, when I originally done the replacement, I did put one of the screws in the wrong place and then had one left over. Now having repaired TVs many years ago, it used to be a common joke about how many screws you were left at the end. But, you know, obviously with your Steam Deck, you don't want to have any left over. So I will replace that screw at a later date. So, yeah, removing the final screw. Once you've done that, you need to basically look for some kind of prying tool. Now, you can go and buy these off the internet, quite commonplace. They are basically, you know, stuff that's used for mobile phone repairs. You could also use your credit cards or Costa Coffee cards, as I'm kind of demonstrating, or even if you've got a game card and you live in the UK, you can do it that way. But yeah, it's just a simple case. Now, because I'd already opened mine and hadn't properly reseated it because of that screw issue I mentioned, it was really easy for me to do this. Now, don't use anything metal because you will, you know, bust up elements of the plastic, and if you do have to RMA it for any reason, that will cause some challenges. Now, you will hear a lot of people scaremongering around RMAing. If you've done this, Steam will not refuse you an RMA if you've replaced the hard drive, if you encounter any faults. All I would say is, if you are to return it, replace your original one. Now, there are only 3 screws that you need to remove here. This is the first one. You will see me remove another because I cocked up, which is this one. That doesn't need to be there. That's actually one that should be on the outside of the Steam Deck and come through. It actually belongs slightly to the left, which I will replace when we put this thing back together. And the final 2 are at the very top in this corner, and the last one is under the silver foil. Now, you can probably see I've already disturbed the silver foil. I did make a bit of a mess of it first time round because I'd kind of rushed because I wanted to get it done. I will say, while you're doing this, just take your time. It's not a race to try and get it done. You know, be really careful how you do this. Now, with the screws in particular, make sure you've got the right head or bit on the end, because I really nearly threaded some of mine. You know, or completely grinded off the grips. If you do that, you can get round it by using an elastic band. I've seen that tip shared many a time. Other things I've heard people use are, you know, stuff like blue tack, etc. Now, there is the SSD. What we need to do first is disconnect the battery. Now, what I would suggest using is, it's not easy to pull it, is use one of those tools, the plastic tools that we had originally, just to try and prise some of the edges out slightly. Once you've done that, you should be able to remove it with your fingers. Once that's done, the last thing to do is kind of discharge any remaining residual energy that may be in the Steam Deck. I don't think it's necessarily a thing you have to do, but I would strongly suggest doing it because it would, you know, potentially save you hot swapping an NVMe drive. Now, after removing this, it does have a silver wrap around it. Now, people would tell you it's very easy to slide off and on. It isn't. Now, on my particular one, I really struggled to get it back on. It is taped, though, so what you can do is basically pull it off, remove it, put it back on, and then you shouldn't have any problems. It doesn't matter that much if you cut it, you know, because you can always just basically just tape the ends to put it. So you've got your Steam Deck ready to go. You've replaced the SSD. Now it's time to prepare the USB stick. Now, you'll hear a lot of people talk about this in different ways, that you need to make sure it's set to a GPT disk rather than an MBR. Now, just so that you understand the difference, MBR is master boot record and GPT is a GUID partition table disk. Now, a lot of guys won't tell you how to do this, which is really frustrating. I kind of looked there when I was looking at guides and couldn't find clear ways of understanding how to do this. Working in IT for a while, there's many ways to do this, but probably the most simple one to users of Windows is basically to use computer management. So going into computer management, we can go into disk management and then storage, and basically this will pull up all our disks. And what I'll be able to find at the very bottom for me is my disk 7, which is my removable drive. Now, if I click on this and go properties, and then under volumes, you can see the partition style for mine is the MBR. So I need to change that before I apply any images. So probably the first thing to do before you do any of the other stuff regarding grabbing the recovery image from Steam or downloading Rufus, which you can do in the background, is to make sure that your USB is set to GPT. So to do that, the simplest way is you can use either command prompt or PowerShell. I would suggest running it as administrator. Now my screen will go blank while my UAC comes up, but basically it's just to run disk part, and again that will then raise that. Now the easiest way is just to do list disk, and that will list all your disks. Now I happen to know mine's number 7. There's several ways I know. Is one, looking at just the size, and also because obviously going back to the computer management side, it says disk 7. So just simple ways to double check. So what we want to do now is select disk 7, and obviously you would pick your number. That's selected. First thing to always do is clean. Now you do this for many reasons. There's one, to make sure there's no partition table set, but also if you want to convert it either way, if you're converting it to MBR or GPT, it's the same process regardless. Just always make sure you clean it first. So we'll run that clean process, which hopefully won't take too long. And there we go, that's succeeded. Now obviously in the meantime you can do other bits of downloading or whatever you need to do. And then it is a simple command of convert GPT. And if you're going to MBR, it's just a reverse, it's convert MBR. And there we go, that's now successfully converted to GPT. And if you want to check that, the simplest way again is go back into here, look at volumes, and now you can see it's a GUID partition table. So I can shut all that now. Now you need to get to 2 links. One of them is both of them are listed here. You can use other tools, you don't have to use Rufus. I just tend to use Rufus quite a lot. If I don't use that, I use Bell and Etcher as well. That's pretty good for doing these kind of things. But go down along to the Steam store. I've already opened it up. Basically just select the agreement and download the deck image, and then I'll just dump it somewhere, and that will download. Now while that's downloading, I've got quite a good connection, so that shouldn't be too long. What I will do is start to prepare the stick on Rufus. So if I find Rufus, which I think is shut because it was addressing that disk while I was doing stuff with it. If I open up Rufus, again my UAC prompts come up, so that's why you've got that. Basically we just need to, once the image is downloaded, which it looks like it has now, which is good, we can double check that in a minute, is just make sure you've got the right one selected. So mine is J, the 128 gig, click on select, and then select the image. And then all you need to do is click start. We'll give you a brief warning to say about destroying any data on the disk. You can see the partition scheme is GPT, which is good, and just click OK. Now this will obviously start to write the image, and again this is very dependent on the speed of the disk that you're addressing it from, your system, and obviously the USB drive you're writing it to. So don't expect this to go at rocket speeds if you're using a slower USB. Now we have our prepared USB, it's time to boot into that mode. So obviously making sure our SteamDeck is powered off, insert your USB. Now I'm using a USB-C device, but you can use one with an adapter. Hold down the volume down and press the power button. You'll hear an audible beep. Once that beep has come, you can let go of the power button and you'll be brought into the boot manager window. Just select your USB C drive or your USB drive, and then click select. Now this process will take some time. It's not something that will happen in a matter of minutes. You will hear people say it takes 5. It is very dependent on the speed of your one SSD and the USB device. Sorry to cut over you there, Andy, but yeah, you're now at the point that pretty much everything's good to go. It will take a bit of time, as I mentioned. Just bear with it. You will get various prompts. It kind of goes through the recovery process and the similar setup to when you first got your SteamDeck. Hopefully when you did originally get your first SteamDeck, you did boot it up once, so you kind of went through that initial initialization period. But yeah, hopefully you've managed to do it. If you've got any challenges, just let me know in the comments, and yeah, I'll be keen to help and address them. Thank you for watching.